Okay, our numbers are continuing to rise. We're so happy to see so many classes joining us today. If you can just type in the chat and let us know where you're joining us from today, especially since we're discussing global citizenship. I know that I have schools joining us from all over the world, so thank you for joining. Wonderful, from South Africa, Cape Town, wonderful. Thank you for joining us. In Dubai, great to see you guys. I'm actually in Dubai myself, so thank you. Oh, wow, we have some from Italy. Hello, everyone. From Saudi Arabia, I see my friends in Saudi Arabia. Good to see you guys. In Spain and Greece. So thank you, everyone. It's great to see so many students from all over the world. Okay, and so again, we'll start in about 1 more minute. Thank you. I will actually be in Saudi Arabia next week. So I see many people typing Saudi Arabia. Great. All right, Greece, wonderful. So I think it's morning for some of you and afternoon for the rest of us. So great, it's wonderful to see. So from Germany, thank you for joining. Frankfurt. Okay, from the Republic, great. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Okay, well, I think we have over 70 classes so far on. Wow, again from Africa, thank you. MGIS, always great to see you guys. Malta, thank you. Well, let's go ahead and get started, everyone. So good afternoon, both students and teachers. I'm so excited about this session. We have been hosting student sessions since last year, but this is our first session for middle school students. So our very first for middle school students. So I'm very excited. And my name is DaVida Alston, and I will be your teacher for today's lesson. And I will also be joined shortly by a very special guest that I'll introduce you to. And I'm thrilled to see so many students from so many different countries. Our theme for today is global citizenship. So it is so great just to see students from Greece, from Africa, from the Middle East, from Europe, just everywhere around the world joining us for this exciting session as we talk about global issues and what it means to be a global citizenship and how to become globally minded, okay? And as we look at sustainability, so all of those words that I just said, sustainability, global minded, we will discuss and you will learn about through today's research, through the articles that we'll read, and through the research and the projects of our very special guests. And so I work at National Geographic Learning, and what's important for us as for our students is that we feel that we have a responsibility to make sure that students, young students like yourselves, that you are aware about how to become caretakers. And so when I use the word caretakers, I mean, how will you take care of our planet and also take care of each other? That's a part of this big concept of global citizenship. And so we want to make sure that you're aware of ways to make our planet fairer, how to make our planet safer, sustainable. And you'll hear me say that word, and we'll kind of look at that word and analyze that word today so that we're all globally minded. So as you're joining me today, because there's so many students from around the world, you are on our Zoom webinar, which means that your cameras are off and your mics are off. But I ask students to please engage by using the chat features. Now, I'll say that, but I want students, if you're using the chat features, to make sure that you're on task, that you're asking questions that are related to what we're discussing, and then please respond to questions as well. So we want you to participate in today's learning, and then you'll have some activities that you'll do with your teachers afterwards. And we're going to give away some prizes for some of the projects that we're hoping that you will do so that you're becoming a global citizen. Okay, so if you're working with your teacher, you can ask your teacher to put your questions or your answers in the chat, and we want to make this as engaging as possible. So for today, here are our objectives for today's session. We want students to be able to develop an understanding of global citizenship. What does that mean? How can we become globally minded? We're going to analyze current global issues that are impacting our planet. So what's happening globally and how can we help? We're also going to both explore and research ways to make our communities more sustainable. And I've said that word a few times, and we're going to define that word together in a moment. And then we're also going to analyze environment. So environmental issues, what are happening in our environment, whether it's where you're joining me for today, if you're in Saudi Arabia, or if you're in Greece or Italy, we're going to talk about environmental issues which are impacting our global society. So that's a lot of different information that we're going to try to tackle in this 30 minutes. So let's see what we can get done. So first, I just want to talk about this definition. What does global citizenship mean? And to help us to answer the question, we're actually going to look at a few different vocabulary words. So starting with global citizenship, but I'm also going to help us to understand, what does sustainability mean? Yeah, it's a big word, but we're going to talk about sustainability. We're going to talk about how we're all interconnected and what does that mean. We're going to talk about natural resources. And then as we're reading articles and text today and looking at research, we're going to learn words impact, distribute, and access. Okay, so these words are going to help to build your understanding of today's lesson. So let's just look at our first lesson, and the lesson is called Global Citizenship. But I want to share a quote that's on this page, and I love this quote. It says, "The world is our family, and our family is our responsibility." Read it one more time. The world is our family, and our family is our responsibility. In the chat, can you just share out, what do you think about when you hear this quote? And this quote is from an Indian neuroscientist and author. What do you think about? What does that make you think about when we say global citizenship? The world is our family, and our family is our responsibility. What do you think about when you hear this quote? So please just type in the chat what comes to mind. Let's see. We're all responsible for each other. I love that. Thank you. Our world is our family, and we have to protect and take care of it. And this is all about the concept of global citizenship. We're all caretakers. Thank you, Colin. Okay, we care for family, but we should also treat and care for our world as well. Love that one. And treat the earth like it is your family. Thank you, everyone. Keep them coming. We need to care about our world. These are great. And that's exactly what global citizenship is about. It's about, just as you take care of your family, no matter where you're joining me from today, do you also think about the greater world and our planet, and think about people that may be from a different place than where you're from? So do you understand that? Okay, so those are great, guys, as you're analyzing the quote. And what I want us to do is also look at the picture and the images here. And these are young teenagers about your age, and look at what they're doing. They're looking at natural resources and how can they make an impact in collecting research and data so that they can inform change. So this is just a different way. So let's think. I'm going to actually show you a short video clip. And in this video clip, I want you to still think about global citizenship. And this video clip was taken from the United Nations Educational Summit. And we're going to hear what they have to say about global citizenship. So let's watch together.
Let me think about that.
This is the difficult question, I must say.
A global citizen is, in my opinion, a global citizen is someone who knows he or she is not only part of his family or her city or her country, but part of a bigger scenery of a bigger world.
A global citizen is somebody who has respect for himself first.
Global citizen is a citizen in the globe. So this is about building our understanding about the globe, about the world, its complexities, its dynamics.
Global citizen is one who has the skills, the knowledge, and the values to be able to live well with people who are within his or her community, within his or her nation, and globally.
Okay. A global citizen is unique as everyone else.
I love the last definition for the concept. A global citizen is someone that is unique as everyone else. So I love that. And so as you guys are thinking about some of the phrases that you heard, what some of the phrases and words that you heard as adults were explaining what a global citizen. I'm sorry, someone said they couldn't hear. Please turn up the volume. Sorry, we couldn't hear it, and we'll share the video at the end as well. Okay, so thank you for that. But some of the things that they were saying, and I'm just going to put some of the phrases here on the screen, is that it's someone who is aware and understands the wider world. So not just the community that you live in, but you understand what's happening in the wider world that we live in. And I think about the pandemic that we're all just experiencing, or we're experiencing now. And this brought us together globally because we were all experiencing something that was similar. Also a global citizen, and I love someone just wrote, celebrates differences. I definitely heard that from the clip as well. Everyone is equal. And then also it's someone that works with others to make our planet more peaceful and sustainable, okay? More peaceful and sustainable. And it's also a person that takes an active role in their community. So not just the community we live in, but thinking of our broader community. So we're all unique. So thank you, everyone. So we kind of built this understanding of what it means to be a global citizen. Now let's look at some issues that may be impacting everyone around the world globally, but definitely some different areas within our planet. So one of the things I want to do is just share some research and some goals, and these are called sustainable developmental goals. Has anyone ever heard of sustainable developmental goals? And I said the word sustainable. What I want to say about sustainable, that this means that we're able to maintain at a certain rate. So we're able to maintain our communities. We're able to maintain or grow natural resources at the same level so that 20 or 30 years from now, our communities are still stable. So that's what sustainable means. And so the sustainable developmental goals, if you all will just read with me, you can read to yourself, and I'll just read some of this at the top. But these goals were developed so that we're meeting the needs of people today while protecting our planet and the people of the future, okay? And the Sustainable Development Goals were developed from the United Nations. And the United Nations are a group of leaders from all over the world who come together and talk about problems that are facing our world, that are facing our planet. And from that, they developed goals that they wanted by 2030, that we had goals to make our world more sustainable. And here are some of the goals that came out of this. And so just as you guys are looking at the goals, what goals that you feel are interesting? So we have goal number 1 is no poverty, 0 hunger, good health and well-being. So these are all goals that universal, no matter where you live, if you're in Greece, if you're in Dubai, if you're in Africa, if you're in Saudi Arabia, no matter where you are in the world, these goals are all important to you as being a global citizen. Okay? For today and for our special guest, we're actually going to focus on 2 goals. We're going to look at problems and a growing crisis that we have with goal 6, clean water and sanitation. Why is this a growing crisis? And we're also going to look at how can we make sure, due to areas that do not have clean water and sanitation, how do we continue to make sure that our communities and the cities that you live in are sustainable? In other words, that they'll be there 20, 30 years from now. You'll have what you need, okay? So we're going to look at goal 6, and we're also going to look at goal 11. So with goal 6, clean water and sanitation, let's just look at this graphic. And I want you in the chat just to type in anything that pops out to you. But I just want to read one of the captions. It says that about 844 million people lack basic water services. So 844 million people. Just think around our globe, how many people that is. They lack basic water services. They don't have clean water. They don't even have water services. And think about how much you use water. As I'm talking today, I have my water and I'm drinking. Just think about that number, okay? And so that really stuck with me when I saw this graphic. What else sticks with you, or do you think about? Agriculture. Too much water is used when not needed. Exactly, thank you. And water distribution, okay? And Lindsay is saying, this is sad. All people should have access to clean water. And that's one of the reasons why we're sharing this, because it forces you to think about, you may have clean water where you live, but look at that number, 844 million people do not. And then look at the graphics at the bottom globally, and you look at areas where there's not enough water, okay? So do not water because others don't. Yeah, do not waste water because others don't. I love some of the things that you're already thinking about as global citizens, how to make change. So we're going to talk about clean water for the world. And my guest speaker, he's actually going to talk about research that he's done with this. And so we're going to look at some of the impact. And I'm not going to read this because I'm actually going to send this to your teachers and you're going to read this together. But this just helps you to think about the impact that clean water can have in the world. Okay, so more than 40%, I'll just read the first line, of the world does not have access to clean water. And so as you're reading this with your class, I want you to think about the impact of not having clean water. And then I want you to think about, how do we find water sources? And that's what our special guest is going to help you with. So as he's talking, I want you to think of two things. Why do we need clean water? And what are the risks of unclean water? Okay. So I want you to welcome our special guest. He's actually joining. So I told you I was in Dubai, but our special guest is joining me from Nairobi today. And he's a National Geographic Explorer. And before I introduce him, I just want to say one important fact that I find very interesting about Mr. Alberto is not only is he a National Geographic Explorer, but he started his research when he was 15. So as young as many of you that are joining me today, he started his research and started his projects as early as 15. So he was globally minded. He already knew what he needed to do to make an impact in his community. And he's going to talk about, while he's in Nairobi, how we're all, no matter where you're joining us from today, how we're all interconnected. So please join me in welcoming Alberto Burgess. Hi, Alberto. How are you today?
Hi, DaVida. Thank you so much for hosting me, and hi, everyone from across the world. I'm so excited to be here and to share with you the work I've been doing when I was, as DaVida said, as young as most of you.
That's amazing. Great. That's amazing. So students, please pay attention, put your questions in the chat, and I'll try to stop and look at any questions that you have for Alberto. We'll stop halfway through his session so that we can answer your questions. Okay, Alberto, I'll turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you. So as DaVida mentioned, I'm calling in from Nairobi. Kenya is on the east coast of Africa. And for this presentation, the first half, I'll be talking about Marsabit, which is highlighted in blue there. And this will actually touch on SDG goal number 11, that's sustainable cities and communities. Next. So speaking about communities, I started the Explorers Club of Kenya to bring people who are like-minded, young and elderly, to come together to help address some of the issues that face my country, Kenya, and specifically things to do with water. Next. And so my journey began at a very young age. I started traveling to Marsabit after high school. And some of the things that really caught my interest was where was this area known as Chalbi Desert that I used to read about that had so many wildlife, and people actually used to get chased by elephants and lions. And interestingly enough, things today have changed. And so we'll get into that a bit later on. But as a result of my travels to Marsabit, I stumbled upon this discovery of a very beautiful golden-haired camel spider that actually is unknown to the scientific world. So I was curious to study it, and that's how my research began in Marsabit. I want you all to count the number of legs you see in this particular creature. It's an arachnid, so we know spiders have 8 legs, but I'm seeing 5 on each side, so 10. I see someone's mentioned 10, that's correct. So actually what you're seeing is what's known as a camel spider, but the front two pair of front 2 legs actually hands, and these are known as pedipalps. So they use that to grab flying insects, which they used to get food out of. Next. And so Marsabit not only has interesting creatures, but sometimes we face drought, and people have to dig through the riverbeds to look for water, as you can see in this image. And as you were mentioning earlier, we need to conserve water. Next slide. And so sometimes it can get so desperate that, as you can see in this image, a man had to actually bend down onto the dry riverbed to drink whatever little water remained. And in the next image, you'll see that the river is getting drier as the months get along. Next. And so eventually, if the drought persists, which it has actually this year been quite long, you end up seeing animals dying and people suffering, and it becomes so dry that even the vegetation itself no longer is green, it turns brown. Next. And so I was curious to find out why this area was experiencing food shortages, yet 120 years ago, animals were living in plenty here. And when you're driving to Marsabit, it's very common to find people ask for lifts. And in this particular case, this man was going to trek at least 40 kilometers in search of water. Next. And so how do people get their water? Most people will tend to walk their camels in search of places that have water, and they use their camels as their beasts of burden. Next slide. And you'll also notice that a lot of people keep donkeys. Donkeys are also excellent animals in carrying water, and they can trek in the dry areas for long distances. Next slide. And so with my community, we decided to do travels to northern Kenya with the aim of finding out what was going on and what are some of the things that we can do to help the people who are in this area. Next slide. So you find that some of the issues that we found out was that deforestation was taking place. And so deforestation is actually the cutting down of trees. And I'm sure you all know that trees are important in conserving water. Trees also help bring moisture from the clouds and bring them onto the land. So when we have no trees, then we have no water.
Albert, I'm just curious, as you show this slide, how is this impacting your region, the deforestation, and how is this impacting your region with the water shortage?
So what happens is Mount Marsabit is elevated, and from the Indian Ocean, it's the highest point coming inland. So the clouds come, and the trees help absorb that moisture from the clouds, from the atmosphere. And then later on, that trickles into the soil and makes its way into the desert areas, as we later see. So if we don't have the ability to trap that moisture, then it just evaporates and disappears, and no one on the ground actually gets to use that.
Okay, wow. And I see in the comments, some people asking if people are cutting down so many trees, the impact of that, and then we don't have enough water. So they're exactly right from your research and what you're sharing.
Mm-hmm. And so what we do when we get on the ground is we gather people together and we ask them, what are some of the things that are facing the landscape? What do you think we should do about it? And so in this image, we were talking to the communities about the deforestation issue. Next slide. And so in order to address that, everyone was like, we need to plant trees. And so that's what we did. We got everyone to start planting trees.
And I also seeing some of our students are saying that in the chat, we have to plant more trees. That's a way that we can help. So great, guys, you're already on top of it.
That's awesome. So you find that also babies come out to help their moms in planting trees. And it's always great to see when young people, even younger than our audience today, are getting involved in planting trees. Next slide. And so another way to help protect the environment is in the areas where you can't plant trees, like in the dry season, we distribute the tree seeds. And in this case, they're called seed balls, and they are coated in charcoal dust, as you can see in the top image. And that gives the trees nutrition, gives them food, so that the day when it starts raining, the trees have a boost of nutrition, and that enables them to survive. Next slide. And so another way to get young people involved is to do this BioBlitz events. So we get all the young people from schools outdoors, and we start observing what's in our environment. We listen out for the birds, we touch the plants, we take observation of what we are seeing, and that helps students to get connected with nature, because that's very important, as you'll find out later. Next slide. Next slide. And so another thing that we do as a community is give people water tanks. So when it starts raining, like today it's raining here where I am, we use the water tanks to harvest the rainwater, and that helps, water the plants during the dry season, and continues to enable people to get water, because we all know water is vital. So if you can harvest it, all the better. Next slide. And so if you remember in the earlier slide I showed people planting trees, this is 1 year later. You can see the trees are already grown to about 1.5 meters. They're doing well. There's also grasses where it was previously bare. So when we plant trees, we enable an environment to start thriving. And this is food for people in the future. This is food for wild animals, for the insects, for the birds. And eventually, this would be the mechanism that brings water from the atmosphere into the landscape.
Albert, I'm going to stop you right here, because there are a lot of questions that relate to the last 4 or 5 slides that you just shared. So I just want to ask those questions. And so some are asking, in this region, how do trees survive during the drought? So how do they survive?
That's a great question. So if you notice in this image, most of the trees are of a particular species. So we plant trees that are able to survive in the dry areas. So here in Kenya, we call these trees the crotons. They grow very fast and they don't take much water. They don't need to drink so much water to survive. So when we are planting the trees, we plant them during the rainy season. And that gives them at least a month and a half to 2 months of water that will then boost them and keep them ready for the next rainy season.
Okay, great. And another question was about the deforestation. Is that the main cause of the droughts or the water shortage? Is that one of the main causes in that region?
It is actually one of the major contributing factors that cause water shortages. The other is actually the advancement of deserts. So the deserts are creeping up the mountain, and they're taking in and killing all the plants that are not able to cope with such high extreme heat levels. So one way to combat that is to actually continue planting trees, so that pushes them away, pushes the desert away rather.
Okay, these are great questions, and there's so many more coming in the chat. I'm going to let you continue, and I'm taking screenshots of all the questions, so we will make sure that we get to them either by the end of the session or we'll send answers to your questions. So just hold tight and we'll continue, and then we'll circle back to questions. So that's just great participation, and I'm loving it. Okay, Albert, I'll continue.
Fantastic. So next slide. So now we're going to move into another part of the country, which is the southeastern part of Kenya, and an area called the Athi River watershed. So this is an interesting area because this place has water, but then it faces a different challenge. So next slide. So when I was growing up, I was about 3-4 years old at this point. My dad used to take me to a very beautiful picnic site known as 14 Falls. And I enjoyed going there because the water was clean. It was a very nice place to be. Next slide. So when we fast forward today, we find that the same waterfalls are actually highly polluted. It's so toxic to be there. The place smells, it's horrible. No one wants to come for picnics there anymore. Next slide. So we began wondering what was actually happening. And when you come to the city, you find that people throw garbage onto the riverbanks like this. And it may look like it's just a small patch. The next slide. When you begin thinking about Nairobi's population of about 5 million people throwing garbage, this is what happens. It starts piling up and it continues piling up downstream. So this is how it looks like. It's very bad. And no one wants to be there. It's horrible. Next slide. And in some cases, which is crazy to think about, is this is a river that looks like sewage. In fact, the water is black. Now, no one can actually drink this water because it's very toxic. It has heavy metals. It's polluted with chemicals from industries. And so that got us thinking, what can we do? Next slide. So once again, I brought my community together, the Explorers Club of Kenya, and this time with a different team. We decided we want to find out what happens downstream. So we decided to begin trekking from the start of the river, which is in a place called Gong Hills, all the way to where it empties in the Indian Ocean. And we wanted to find out what's going on and how does the water pollution change. And so our work involved taking water samples, like you can see here, taking readings of the heavy metals, the pH, the temperature, and the bacteria content that's in the water. And you can see in this image, a boy that is as young as you are has to come to the river every day to fetch water with his donkeys, and that's water they used to drink. So it's not nice to drink dirty water because that can give us viruses. Next. And so our team takes observations, we collect insects. Insects are a great way to find out if water is clean. If you have dragons, if you see dragons near water, that means it's clean water. If you see snails, slugs, then you know that the water is a bit polluted. So that's a great way to tell quickly what's going on. Next slide. And so we continued our trek downstream, taking note of the plastic pollution. You can see it's even come up to where the trees are. It's so horrible. Next slide. And it's crazy to think that whilst we were trekking to come and study the river, we had carried our own water, but eventually our own water sources dried up. And so we had to go into the river and drink the very dirty water that we came to study. That is so unfortunate. It's actually disgusting. But lucky for us, we had these life straws. As you can see, one of our members, Mario, used to drink water that helps filter some of the dirt. But not many people have that. The people who live around these areas, they just drink it straight. So next slide. So we're not going to bury our heads in the sand having trekked a section of the Athi River like ostriches tend to do. Next slide. We're actually using this opportunity to come up with a report. Now, our report is known as the Athi River Expedition Report, was actually released 2 weeks ago. It highlights some of the things that people can do. What are some of the cleanup strategies? What can industries do to stop polluting their landscapes? What can the government do to help protect this vital ecosystem, the Athi River? Next slide. So some of the work we do on the ground, whilst we wait for larger action to take place from the government and other corporate entities, is we go and talk to the people. We tell them, this is what we found out. These are the results of our report. Here's what you can do as an individual or as a small village along the river to help protect it. So one of the things in this particular day we were telling them was to avoid using fertilizers and chemicals for their farms. Because eventually we want the river to look clean like it is here at this point, which is way further downstream, so that people can enjoy the water and use the water for their domestic use, and also the wildlife will also not fall sick. The people will have better healthy systems. Next slide. Which brings us back to Marsabit, which is where we started our presentation, which unfortunately, doesn't have rivers that are permanent. So in this case, when we travel to Marsabit to do our tree planting events in the desert, you can't plant trees because it gets very hot and they rarely survive. So we distribute water to the people there. So it's also a way, if you're ever traveling out to the desert and you see people who need water, or even when you're in the urban areas, in the cities, and you see someone who is homeless, who may need water, give that person water, because water is life, and it goes a long way to helping all of us become part of the global citizenship and interconnected people. So if we don't do that, then everyone gets to suffer, and it's not nice when we have problems to deal with. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening in. The questions that are coming in are just amazing. So DaVida, if you're able to shoot some my way, I'll answer them. And
yes,
not
definitely.
Time,
I just want to thank students. There are so many questions coming in the chat. I know teachers that we are at our 30-minute time. We will stay on longer. So if your class, if you have time in your schedule and you're able to stay on, please stay on with us and we'll try to answer some of the questions. We will also populate all of the questions that students have asked, because I've been writing down, taking screenshots of all the pictures, and we're going to capture them through the recording as well. And then we will send answers to all of your questions via the follow-up information, as well as the unit of study that really looks at this information and then how students can help. So if you can stay on, we'll take a few questions. And then we also will just end it with how can students help? Because remember, we want to take this back to how can you become a global citizen? And there's a project that I would like all students to participate in that's thinking about how you can help, how you can be an explorer, just like Alberto, and make change in your community or other communities that are less fortunate or that do not have some of the natural resources. So Alberto, a few questions that I'm just going to ask, because some of them were repeated. When you're talking about the river, are there fish that live in the river, and where do the fish go? Do they go to the ocean, or what happens to any of the fish that are in the river?
That's a great question.
It just came up again, the freshwater fish. Yeah, where do they go?
Yes. So freshwater fish, unfortunately, can't survive in the ocean. So they're not able to migrate downstream, unlike salmon in the northern parts of the planet. So in this case, unfortunately, the fish that aren't able to survive the toxic chemicals end up dying. And it's common to see dead fish floating downstream. And in some case, we have a type of fish that's called the lungfish. So that one is adapted to dirtier conditions of water conditions, and it's able to form a mucus membrane around itself, which can also survive drought areas or even the pollution that is within the water.
Thank you. And this question was asked in two different ways. It's about the kits that you're using or the filter systems. Paul just asked, where could he find kits so that they can test? They want to, test water that's near a river that's near their school, near a pig farm. Where can they get some of these kits so that they can do their own tests? I love that question, to be able to see what's happening in their own community.
Oh, that is great. And in fact,
great question.
About that, I see a BioBlitz event happening for that particular school. So you can purchase some of these kits at the science lab stores that sell laboratory equipment. They're actually very cheap, especially like the pH meters, the e-conductivity meters. Those are items you can get quite readily available in the cities. And it would be a great thing to do with the students outdoors.
Yeah.
What was the second part of the question?
Well, I think that kind of answers another, that pretty answered the question. And another question Lindsay's class had, does the drought spread through the land? So if you can just give a little bit more information about the drought and what happens as it's spreading across the region.
Right. In fact, that's a great question. Yes, the drought tends to spread into new areas with months as the months go by. So you find that areas that are low-lying, like the deserts, are the first places that get hit with drought. And then as it continues intensifying, it goes into the savanna landscapes and eventually gets to the forests. And when it gets to the forest, then it's very, very critical because the forests are home to so many animals and plant species. And a lot of people depend on forests.
And then a question, it's coming up again, but it came up early. How many countries are, impacting? And I'll go back to one of the slides that I showed previously, and you can just see worldwide, when I was showing the sustainable developmental goals and looking at clean water, worldwide, the impact. So Alberto shared a region where he currently lives in his community, but also in Asia and other parts of the world. This is a problem, and Alberto's shaking his head. So there's other communities as well that this is happening. Yeah. Okay, so this is just wonderful. Students are asking about charities. How can we contribute? So that brings us to, we want to get all the questions. So our team, we're populating the questions. We'll get this back. We may have to do a part 2 to this session because I'm just really enjoying how engaged students are. But this is the big thing. How can you take action? So I will send teachers our information that is from our LIFT series. This is where our unit is coming from, that is on global citizenship, that is on clean water. And within the unit, there are various examples of how students, no matter where you live in the world, and how you can be change agents, global citizens, how you can help. And so here are just some different examples of how students and groups are helping. This is one in Uganda that I'm showing on the screen. This is another example of how students are coming together. The same filter straw that Alberto showed is being used here. And so one of the things that we want students to do is to really be creative. Think about how can you help? How can you be innovators too? Because it's more about as a global citizen. Remember I said caretakers of the world, your future. So how can we be innovators? And I want you to think about projects or different ways that you can help. I've given some examples here on the screen. So how you can help personally, how can you track your own water usage? Because someone said earlier in the track that we just waste our water. It's exactly right. I noticed that there are water bottles everywhere. Not only is that a plastic issue, but it's also wasting water. How can you help through your school? How can you help locally? Even if you live in the Middle East, I live in the Middle East, and this may not be a current problem, but how can you come together locally to help out in the world? And then how can you also help globally? So I'm going to send this to all teachers, all classes joining, and we want you to look at these ideas, but you may think out of the box and say, I want to think very innovatively, and I want to think of something else. I want to be an explorer like Alberto, and I want to think of a way that I can come up with an impact. That's how I can make impact in either my community or make impact globally, okay? So we'll send you information, and we will be sending prizes to students and classes and displaying your projects on our website, okay? So this is just really great. There's so many questions still coming in, or statements. I love these. We are definitely way over time, so we will stay on for a few more minutes and try to get in some more questions, but we will actually send all of the answers to teachers so that they can discuss it with your class, along with all of the articles that were shared today and the unit that was used for today's lesson. Okay. Jonathan just typed in, is there a way to access this recorded webinar to show another of my class later? Yes, Jonathan, if you could just send me a direct message and I will get the recording to you very quickly. We will be putting it on our website, but I'll get it to you very quickly. So Jonathan, just send me your email in the chat or the Q&A, and I will send the recording over to you so your class can watch it. Okay. Thank you, everyone. And we'll stay on. We'll try to get all the questions. Thank you so much, Alberto. Great, great session. I learned so much as well. Okay.
Indeed. It was great to see there was someone.
And one of my other colleagues just said that she will also put the recording link in the follow-up email in Zoom so that you can get it there too. And Alberto, I just want to turn it over for you. Any closing words?
Thank you. I'm so happy that everyone was participating in this session, and there were great questions coming out. As DaVida mentioned, these are some of the ways you can participate on a personal level, as a school, and locally, as you think about what is happening on a global perspective. So if you want to reach out to my organization, I'll just go ahead and type our address, it's www.explorerskenya.org. So it's www.explorerskenya.org. So that's one way you can find out more about how you can participate in doing your own expedition, maybe along a river that's in your country.
Thank you, Alberto. And for teachers, if you just want to more information about any of the resources that we use for today, I am using and showcasing one of our new series at National Geographic Learning. It's called Lift, and it is a middle school series. It will be new for the next academic year. So if you want more information about this and one of our efforts through National Geographic Learning, someone put in the chat, what is National Geographic Learning? How do we help with this? And it's really about exposing students through our literacy materials, through our content-based English materials, exposing them to global topics, and also having them to participate in hands-on projects that are about making change. So that's one of our, when I said at the beginning, it's our responsibility that we believe is very important. So this new series that we are publishing for the new academic year, you will find topics very similar to this in research where students can ask questions and expand, communicate with each other in dialogue to become global citizens. So if you want more information, I will put my email as well in the chat. And then teachers also next week, the same topic, global citizenship, looking at our content-based English, we will just focus on strategies. So different strategies we use today, but strategies that you can use with your students to make sure that they're engaged in your literacy classes. It will be hands-on strategies, and I will be joined by another National Geographic Explorer and one of our authors, actually the author and the advisor of the Lift series that I'm showcasing today. So please join us next week. You can look at the QR code right here in the corner and sign up for our teacher webinar next week. So thank you, students. We enjoyed it. And teachers, thank you for taking a moment out of your busy days to make sure your students were engaged in this session. Have a great afternoon or morning, depending on where you're joining us from. Enjoy the rest of your day.